Good morning, everyone. I see that people are joining. We have about 45 people already connected. So good morning, everyone. I hope you had a good coffee. My name is Monique Calisti. I'm the coordinator of the project 6G for Society that together with another SNS JU project, TrialsNet, organized this workshop. Today we are here to discuss a very hot topic, KVIs, key value indicators, but more precisely, we will look at objective and subjective approaches to key value indicators. The idea is to share insights about methodological approaches and evaluation instruments, to discuss them with you, learn from your experience, and possibly report that for future use and work. So very briefly, the idea is to gather examples of how social and sustainability values can be assessed and evaluated from the project, but also from external experts. Then explore in particular approaches that look beyond technical key performance indicators and consider also non-technical evaluations of value. The idea is to improve our understanding, the capacity to address these value outcomes in practical terms. What we aim to in terms of outcomes is to provide a short report of what will be discussed today, but also possibly propose future actions that will help the community and possibly also not only the SNS JU stakeholders, but other researchers and innovators outside our context to build upon what we have learned, and also to inform any future activity that will happen in the context of the SNS JU about KVI and sustainability. Now, I will give you a few words about 6G for Society, what it's all about, and then I will give the floor to the coordinator of the TrialsNet project before we will enter into the more hands-on discussion. 6G for Society is a coordination and support action that is focusing on ensuring societal and societal, environmental, and economic values are guiding the design and development of technologies like 6G that will be key in order to balance out how the digital transformation of our society will empower humans and at the same time protect our environment and allow sustainable development of our economy. We have 6 partners on board. You see their logos here. We're all from 6 different countries, and we are mixing up profiles and expertise from more ICT to more sociological and environmental expertise. So you all, or I guess, I hope you are all familiar with the 6G SNS JU. That is a joint undertaking in which industry and public authorities and diverse kind of researchers, innovators are merging forces in order to develop the next generation of mobile communication networks. In doing this, one of the key aspects is that we want to engage and include also players that traditionally have been less involved in the design of technologies. So we want to contribute to the development of smart networks and services that are by design taking into account openness, inclusion, sustainability, trustworthiness, and to do that we have adopted a multi-stakeholder approach, trying to talk to technologists, but also to policymakers, to end users, citizens, small businesses, so that at the end of the day, we dig very much into what are the key values that we want to unleash for the good of the society. To do that, we're not alone, so we're closely coordinating with several working groups and technical task forces in the SNS JU, and we are seeking also collaboration with other projects, like in this case, TrialsNet. The idea of our project is really to dig into providing a unified approach to what we call a technology acceptance model for 6G, but also defining and promoting a common set of key value indicators, and also lead the way towards the definition of key sustainability indicators, moving even beyond the values. Of course, the idea here is to empower the 6G community on how to integrate EU policy and legislation into technology solutions for future networks development and services. The idea is also to contribute and align with efforts that are ongoing at the standardization and regulatory level. So very ambitious, very important, the work we're doing for the whole community. We have several planned outputs, and in these slides that will be shared after the meeting, you will find more in details. What for us it's very important is that events and workshops like the one of today are meant really as a way to share with you our learnings, but also to gather from you your viewpoint, your experience, and elaborate this to provide value to the whole community. Now, you see them listed here. You can go to our website, 6gforsociety.eu. There you will find a lot of publications, input, insights into what we have done so far. Some of our deliverables will become public later on, but we're trying to share as much as possible through shorter white papers publication that will also come up. So now I would like to thank you and give the floor to Silvia. And Silvia, I will stop sharing so that you can share your slide, right?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Let me see if I'm sharing.
Perfect. We can see perfectly your slides.
So good morning and welcome all to this workshop. Who speaks is Silvia Provedi from Ericsson, coordinator of TrialsNet. I just wanted to give a short presentation of why for us it is important, this workshop, and what is TrialsNet. Smart cities can improve livability and the quality of the life of everyone, and beyond 5G and the 6G technologies are the ones that positive impact important social values such as resilience, sustainability, inclusion, trust. And the vision of TrialsNet is just to enable the realization of these important societal values by implementing 5G beyond the 5G applications. And we realize this through the implementation of large-scale trials involving verticals and involving real users through 3 main domains of applications. We have designed 13 use cases that we have developed and implemented around a wide coverage area of Europe in 4 main clusters. We have used innovative 6G application using platform and the network solution that we have designed and implemented by the project itself. And the ultimate goal of the project is just to perform a quantitative and a qualitative analysis of the results of these trials, and then understand if the capabilities we used are sufficient for this use case, and define the requirements towards the next generation of mobile. We have also onboarded sub-projects through the open call process. We have designed and implemented 13 use cases that are spread around 3 different domains: infrastructure, transportation, security and safety, e-health and emergencies, culture, tourism and entertainment. There are use cases that are trialed in more places using different applications. We have used a methodologies that is a loop, starting from the use case definition, in which we have also involved the final users. We have then implemented and tested our applications, evaluated the results, optimized by added, implemented other functionalities, and we are doing this approach for all the different use cases. Now we are in the 3rd year of the project. We have executed already some large-scale trials involving real users. And you will hear from my colleague Claudia the results, the KVI results of one important trial that we have already performed. So thank you to listen, and Katrina, please, the floor is yours.
Hi all, I'm gonna take over the screen for a quick second. Now we're getting to some nitty-gritty of the actual process here. So now, thank you both, Sylvia and Monique, for the introductions. I'm going to now talk us through the agenda and the rest of the activities for today. So now that we've set up the motivation behind this and why these two projects collaborated on this event, I want to share what we're going to do. So today we're going to start with trying to really look at different types of approaches to figuring out how to do indicators for social value. And we have 4 projects who are going to start, and they're each going to do a quick 5-minute presentation sharing of an example indicator that they've created. That'll provide us material to speak about for the rest. But then we have 2 external guests who have come and are giving speeches for us today, or presentations for us today, rather. And I'm very, very excited for them. So I'd like to introduce Ahmed Yagmi. And is Ree with you, Ahmed?
Yes, I'm also here.
Oh, fabulous. Great. So Emmett and Ree are going to do one presentation for us, sharing their approach that they've developed to identifying and tailoring indicators. And then Yulia Romachenko from Social Value International will also do this. And she's actually going to run us through a couple fun activities as well, because all of us like our hands-on. And then we're going to have time for Q&A to ask them questions and engage and build on their knowledge and wealth of expertise. Then we're going to do a second half where we take this knowledge and apply it in a very quick hands-on small group activity, mirror board activity, very short, 25 minutes. But then after we're doing this, so we can actually see what it means to try to test out these ideas that have just been presented to us. So that then once we get to our final event, which is with another one of our guest experts, Tim Godspeed, who's here with us today, again, an expert in social value indicators and one of the founders of Social Value International, we will do a guided Q&A to start with him, and then open the floor to everybody to actually further understand and think through the challenges and the unique possibilities of doing this kind of approach to subjective and objective indicators for social value and sustainability. So that's our process. So without further ado, I want to just say we are recording. So just so you're very aware, we want to be able to put the presentations online for future reference for everybody to engage with. So without further ado, going back to the agenda, I'm going to actually pass the floor off to my co-collaborator on organizing this workshop, Claudia, who's going to guide us through the project presentations. All right, so I'll stop sharing and send it to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Katrina, and thanks to our guests and participants. Let me please share my screen. So this is the first of the 4 examples. of practical applications of KVIs. The example is drawn from one of the use cases of TrialsNet, namely use case 12, located in Parco Valentino from Turin. The purpose of the use case is to increase the citizens' engagement with the historical and cultural heritage of the park. And by citizens, we mean specifically students, young adults, and families. The use case features a fantasy game with a number of phases and stages using AR, VR, and the metaverse, and particularly exploring the concept of social metaverse, since the game is intended for teams of players only. You see here, in these blue circles, the key values that we associated with this use case. And for all of them, we follow the same procedures. So first of all, we defined the KV based on previous projects and on the literature, and we adapted the definition to the specifics of our project and use case. Then we operationalized the key values, meaning that we tried to translate them into measurable, quantifiable, or at least observable terms. And then we went through a round of expert reviews with project partners and with experts in psychometrics. And in between these reviews, we preliminarily tested our indicators with users during 2 design thinking sessions. We call it actually Design Thinking Plus because we added an extra phase of mapping resources and constraints. And one interesting thing, for example, that emerged is that the key value inclusion, which was not initially part of the design, was added as a result of the interaction on the feedback that we gathered. So today I'm focusing only on the key value edutainment, and the assessment is meant to verify whether the technological game enhances educational experience with the cultural heritage. So I'm going to present together for brevity the methods and the results. We engaged 120 secondary school students aged 16 to 18, and we divided them in 33 teams because, as I said, this is a social game. And first, we turned to objective indicators like time spent in the game score, and knowledge score. And you see the results here. So all the teams concluded the game, and this is an amazing result in itself because the game implied a 90-minute walk through the park in the winter. So we're very happy of this. Then 64% of the teams also successfully concluded the game, meaning that they could solve all the challenges. And more importantly, for our key value, 75% of the teams were able to answer correctly all the content questions on the historical and cultural landmarks of the park. These are important indicators, but they do not allow us to understand the perceptions and the experience of the users. So we also turned to a number of subjective indicators, and we created a questionnaire with the 3 items that you see listed here, with responses on a 5-point Likert. And what we also wanted to do is to have a benchmark for our results, because this is a problem that we often have with key values. We don't have a benchmark. So we devised the research design with a control condition, meaning that all 120 participants tried out the game, but half of them also went through a control condition that was a guided tour of the park along the same cultural landmarks, but without the gaming component. And you see the results here. So both conditions score well above average, but the AR/VR game perception was more positive than the one concerning the tour in the park. So participants found that it facilitated more the learning of new contents and was more enjoyable and engaging. And of course, we also gathered the qualitative feedback from open questions to improve the technical solution. And to conclude, I'm going to present also 2 further analyses that we performed on the data, because we thought that part of our methodology is also to understand the relationships between different kinds of indicators. So first of all, we tried to map KPIs and KVIs. We performed a regression analysis with some relevant KPIs related to the technology to see if they could predict the subjective experience of edutainment of the participants, and we found no significant association. Our interpretation is that the game was built to be resilient against mild in network conditions, and this prevented user perceived issues during gameplay. And also we connect the different indicators and see how much they predict what we call the experience value index, meaning the mean value of these two items that you see here. We divided all the variable in 3 blocks, and we use the hierarchical regression analysis to see how much variance of the experience value index is explained by each group of variables. So as you see, game performance, the actual performance of participants does play a role, but a much higher role is given by what we call the proximal KVIs, like availability and acceptance and mail acceptance, meaning that these are key values that are strictly connected with technical aspects of the solution. And it's very important to test them in the very first stages of the deployment of the technology in order to see if they can be improved. And then we inserted in the model distal KVIs, meaning the other KVIs which are more distant from technology, but include cultural and social valence. And interestingly, to make it short, when we put all the variables together, the only relevant predictor of the experience value was edutainment. So the main conclusion that we draw from this data is that in this use case and for these participants, the combination of educational engagement the value to the experience as the participants expressed it. So this is my email if for further questions, but I don't want to steal any more time. So I'm going the floor now to Marco Gramaglia, who is going to present his example of a subjective and objective KVI for social and sustainability values for the project Origami. Marco,
yes, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
So let me quickly share my presentation. Okay. So hopefully you can see my slides, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So let me play the slide set. So so basically, can you see them full screen, right?
No,
Well,
we probably see
Oh.
the presenter mode. You have to
Okay.
switch under
Oh.
display setting.
Okay, now yes. Okay, so yes, so I will going to I'm going to discuss basically one key value that we have in Origami, and then some ideas we have for quantifying it as KVI, and it is related to business model and trustworthiness. So it's not exactly a key value attached to society like citizen, but it's more related to the business model, because okay, one of the objective we have in the Origami project is actually to bridge some gaps that basically were hindering the application of the 5G technologies in, I would say now, almost the last decade. So we have identified that the revenue opportunities that the 5G technology are in many cases still linked to the traditional business to customer channels. So, okay, operators charging the final user, while the technology, 5G technology, allows for much richer configuration of the network through slicing or other technology. So in Origami, basically, Besides the specific technology enablers that we are going to use to empower this vision, we are also trying to analyze and provide a different business model attached to our solution. So I list here the ones that we have in the project. So the interoperability at the radio access network, especially targeting the O-RAN application, the utilization of hybrid AI and RAN workloads, and finally the global operator model. That is the one that I'm going to discuss a bit more in detail now, because it has the need to establish trust between different parties. So in a nutshell, global operator model, it's basically our idea to build a kind of federation of operator to empower the vision of a unique market for IoT devices. So basically, nowadays there are millions of SIM cards attached to IoT devices that are roaming around the world because the business provider of the IoT device contact an eSIM provider located in another country, and then that IoT device is always staying in one country only. So this causes a lot of inefficiency in the network traffic. So you can see in the central part of my slide, basically you can have home routed roaming, which is the traditional scenario. So basically the traffic goes back to the original country and then goes to the internet. Or you can have local breakout, or you can have a IPX hub breakout. So we're going to study basically how different operators can federate to provide a unique and optimized version of this network. And these need to have to build trust. We need to build trust basically across different operators to empower this vision. And we do that through an element that is called zero trust layer that basically provides the interfaces to improve this business relationship among different parties. So basically two operators, or as another example, an operator and a service provider, such that the overall business behind now 6G becomes more efficient and economically sustainable. Another example we have also in this area is the one of the zero trust network analytics. So basically, there are many functionality in the network, RAN or core, is not important at this stage, that may have limited customizability. So the functionality is there, but it's tailored to what the operator is providing, while the customizability is key for the commoditization of the network. So if as a service provider I want to commoditize the network, I need to have a certain degree of customization on the network function that I would like to have. So in this view, customizability shall be achieved without exchanging any sensitive data or business intelligence. So basically this zero trust layer that we are providing here should basically bridge these two worlds: service provider, network operator, or network operator and another network operator, without exchanging any sensitive data, but creating this trust environment that the two entities can use to cooperate. So this is the other example I was describing before. So instead of analytics, which is one functionality, we have here charging. So we need to create this trusted environment between two different operators, such that they can charge user from one another in an entrusted environment. And we're going to solve, for instance, this kind of problem through blockchains, for instance, thanks to the usage of these zero trust layer that I discussed before. So coming to the main point of this discussion, basically, as in Origami, we're going to enable new business model in the business-to-business domain. So basically, how different operators and operator and application service provider like video streaming service provider or robotics application service provider can basically federate and create in a trusted environment new services, and then for the operator new revenue channels to make the network more economically sustainable. So basically, these enabler, in our opinion, are going to succeed only if they enable such trustworthiness. So in the global operator model that we provide, that we envision, because different operators need to trust each other, or for the limited trust network analytics, as we were discussing before, where a service provider should trust the network operator on the analytic that is providing, and the other way around. So in the project, we have identified different KPIs that can be used to validate the specific technical solution that we propose in this context. So for instance, resource efficiency. So we can show that if we enable this view of global network operator, we're going to save resources because we remove all these inefficiency that we are going to have in this context. Or for instance, for the limited trust network analytics, the accuracy of the machine learning solution, which is basically more aligned to the goals of the service provider. We are working on the definition of the metrics for the key value indicators for us, but it's a bit more difficult because basically, as I said at the beginning, this is business to business. So we'll need to basically try to discuss with other operators or service provider, which we don't really have in the consortium. Okay, we have operators, but of course it would be a bit biased, just measuring indicator using them as users of the technology. So we are basically working on this, trying to define what this indicator for the trustworthiness will make sense for us. And we are basically going to integrate and try to quantify them in our future work. So yes, basically it's in a nutshell what we are doing in Origami with the trustworthiness key value. We're also working a lot on the environmental sustainability, but I thought that trustworthiness could be a good example here.
Thank you. I apologize. I have the hard task to keep the timing going. So thank you so much for the nice presentation. And I will leave the floor now to Emilio Trigili from Deterministic 6G. 5 minutes are indeed a very short time to present all the work that is being done.
Yeah,
so apologies.
To be short. Can you see the screen, I guess?
Yes.
You see a presentation mode or the correct one?
Correct one. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So good morning. My name is Emilio Trigili. I'm going to present our approach for the KVIs for the Deterministic 6G project. And specifically, I'm working on one of the use cases for the project. So In short, the objective of deterministic 6G is to develop a new architecture to optimize the deterministic end-to-end communication with 6G. And we are doing this through innovative use cases, considering the architectural aspects for end-to-end deterministic communication, but also other important aspects such as awareness, ensured by means of 6G time synchronization solutions to support time-critical applications, and also anticipatory methods leveraging digital twins to ensure that deterministic performances are guaranteed. So we have different use cases, for example, exoskeletons, extended reality, adaptive manufacturing, and smart farming. And we are using also the concept of key values and key performance indicator to understand how we can shape also the architecture for the deterministic 6G. So using KVIs also to define some architectural principles for 6G. And the approach that we are following is based on this, I guess most of you are familiar with this white paper, and we are taking this as a basis to refine then the impact area and sustainability dimension. So we are considering first which are possible impact areas, starting, for example, for the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to understand then which of these impact areas can be influenced by our use case. And then for each of these impact areas, we are considering hypothetical gains and losses. So considering how the introduction of 6G could produce a positive or negative impact in that specific impact area. Of course, this will be then associated to some key values and key values indicator. All this information you can find also on our website. We have a deliverable which is publicly available. So some example of impact dimensions that we are considering are, for example, environmental impact areas such as resource usage or emissions that might be relevant, for example, for adaptive manufacturing or smart farming use cases, but also socioeconomic impact areas such as healthcare and well-being that might be relevant for example, the exoskeleton use cases. I want to do a short focus on the exoskeleton use case because it's the one where I'm specifically working on. For those of you who are not familiar with exoskeletons, they are wearable robots that can be used to support human motor function. So in the industrial context, an exoskeleton can be used, for example, to support workers in performing physically demanding tasks by preserving also the musculoskeletal system, so providing additional safety for the user. So the exoskeleton can sustain part of the physical effort that the operator is supposed to have. So our approach in this use case is to consider that part of the computational load can be of the exoskeleton, so considering the sensors and the actuators can be offloaded to the edge cloud. So in this way, we can include also in the control system of the exoskeleton a high number of information coming from the smart factory. So for example, sensors from cameras, from the environment that can be used to define a specific action that the exoskeleton is performing. So improving safety for the user and the adaptivity to the different tasks that a user can perform. For example, with digital twinning, we can also monitor and perform optimize the performance of the exoskeleton, for example, to inform about the correct postures that the operator is supposed to have during the working task. So some example of KVI we are considering, for example, you consider the impact area of the healthcare. So since the exoskeleton has the main action of preserving the musculoskeletal structure, so reducing the effort of the operator, of course, the healthcare impact area would be the most straightforward one. And we can have some positive impacts, for example, the ability to conduct ergonomic assessment by using the digital twin. And this can improve, for example, personal health and protection from harm. It can be, for example, quantified by considering objective measures such as the reduction of the cost for the care of work-related injuries or the reduction of the number of work-related injuries. Other possible impact area could be, for example, the privacy and integrity. We are exchanging information about the user and the environment, how the person is performing a task, biomechanical information about the user. So we have another area about the privacy and integrity related to values such as trust and privacy and confidentiality. If on the one hand, we have a more robust data exchange with the 6G, we can also introduce potential risks of data leakage. So this can be, for example, indicated and quantified subjectively by considering the reported confidence in the device, or quantitatively by considering the number of data breaches. And finally, other possible key impact areas could be the social equality and inclusion. So for example, if we can offload part of the computational load, we have a limited number of sensors and actuators. For example, battery, reduce weight of the battery, we can reduce the cost and improve the accessibility of the technologies that can be quantified, considering, for example, the number of factories that are adopted the technology or the number of users who have adopted the technology. So we are not elaborating more on how we can provide numbers for these key value indicators, but we are trying to use the concept of KVIs, as I mentioned before, to set also some principles for the operation of the architecture and the services on the 6G. So
thank you very much, Emilio, for these very neat examples. Now the floor goes back to Katrina with a different hat, because she's going now to present her practical example of indicators from the perspective of the project FIDAL.
Only if I can unmute myself. There we go. So yes, I'm switching hats for a second, and I'm representing the FIDAL project, where I lead the work on KVIs there. And I'll give a quick example that we have of one of our subjective KVIs. So in FIDAL, we have two verticals, two domains that we're working in: media and public safety and disaster response. And so this is actually a KVI that we developed for the public safety and disaster response from built on a lot of work that we do with the stakeholders themselves, trying to understand how these different types of communication tools and affect their ability to basically provide safety and security. So one of the things that's come up is that we need the tools to not be distracting from the main life-saving activities. Often they find themselves quite distracted by how the tools function and what the tools do, even as the tools try to support and provide them the information and situational awareness that they need. So we drafted this up in a way where we started with the value of safety and security, basically the protections of human, prevention of harm, building safer communities. We built it down to a more detailed objective where we said, well, we want the ability to use the tools while keeping focus on the final goal of saving lives and preventing harms. We actually struggled with this one quite a bit because we wanted to start with things like the ability to better assess vulnerabilities or the ability to save lives, but we were trying to figure out what we could measure within the lifespan of the project, well, where the tools aren't necessarily being deployed in real world disasters to test out, can they actually save more lives? So we try to understand what features that the responders look for as they try to determine whether these tools have the potential to save lives. And so this was one of them. So to have the tools help them keep focus on their goals. And so we tried to identify for who, users, PPDR, what scale, well, this would support at a response event. And we were keeping track of what's at stake to remind ourselves why this matters. So the ability to make decisions at difficult times requires us to keep focus so that we can support the vulnerable people. So from there, we came up with a metric that we wanted to do a subjective assessment of the impact of the technology on task load. I'll explain that in a second. And so our evidence basically is user and ideally also organizational. We haven't yet run the trials to do these assessments, building on the NASA TLX. Now, this is a system that's used by multiple different disaster response agencies throughout Europe. So it's also something we're trying to build on a metric that already is well accepted as evidence by the stakeholders. And the way this works is that It's a system that's been set up running for decades, and it starts with a weighting of different types of factors that affect one's ability to engage: mental demand, physical demand, temporal demand, performance, effort, and frustration. And actually, it starts with a weighting of the factors. So you go through a list of which factors mattered more, and they're all weighed against each other. Frustration or mental demand, which one affected you more? Effort or temporal demand, which one affected you more? And it balances those out and creates a weighting. Then you answer 6 basic questions on a slider scale of 1 to 10, and then you calculate them together to create an analysis. And you can get a weighted rating per person and then average per person, so that we can actually measure this across all users, and it can be expressed as a number. So basically their goal. We didn't want to leave it here, though, because yes, this gives you an insight of what was their task load, but it doesn't give us an explanation of why. So we're pairing this with a questionnaire, a very short questionnaire, because they'll already have done one, so we don't want to tax them. But basically some questions that help us understand why or where things would happen, so we can actually do something about this indicator results and move it forward. So it's a comparison of the TLX score and then this Likert score that we'll get from the survey that we'll bridge together, and hopefully then be able to get some sort of indicator that will result for us. So this is our approach. We have yet to test it, but we'll be testing it shortly the next couple of months, and hopefully we'll have some results very soon. And I hope I kept within my 5 minutes.
You did.
Now that we're done here, now we're going to actually switch gears a little bit and switch from these projects, and are very attempted to figure out what we're doing in our projects. And you've got a nice broad set of examples from a diverse set of projects, which is exactly what we wanted. And now we're going to switch to our external experts who have been developing methods to help identify what makes good indicators, and how do you pick them and how do you choose them? And they've got 2 different approaches that I think would be extraordinarily valuable for this community. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to pass the floor to Emmett and Rhi, who will then share their unique methodology.
Perfect. Thank you. I will share my screen.
And can you guys both, my apologies, can you guys both do a quick little introduction about yourselves?
Sure. Did I share my screen? Now, can you see my screen?
We can see your whole screen. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Now, okay, that's fine. So yeah, first, thank you for the invitation. Pleasure to be here. My name is Emma from Yakma. We are a research consultancy company in Delft, Netherlands, where our main activity is basically around monitoring and assessing technology against the non-technological aspects, which varies from social, ethical, environmental, governance, and so on. So that is the main activity. What I can also maybe give a floor to my colleague Ria to introduce herself quickly, because we will go through the slides together. And maybe Ria can,
hello everybody. Firstly, for Emma, I think it's me who is sharing the screen, just so if you click and nothing happens, it's me. My name is Ria Larsen, and I'm part of this assessment, and I am mainly working on the social ethical assessment of new technologies, and how we define what it is that we actually want to assess. So that's my core role. And floor back to Emma, I think.
Okay, great. Do I share my screen or you share?
I think I share. If I
think I'm sharing. So but okay. Yeah. It's okay. So I will go through. So I think as I said, I'm going briefly what we are doing, which kind of indicators we are talking, and Ria go more in the hands-on examples of how we look at the indicator setting. As I said, we are looking more socio-technical perspective, and the areas that basically we work varies from trustworthy AI and responsible digital solution to the foresight. I can jump quickly from each part, but so it's basically we do the ethics technology assessment. Under ethical innovation, we do AI impact assessment. and risk assessment under trustworthy AI. We do more normal and conventional as like a sustainability reporting under circularity and sustainability, and then also foresight exercises. So for trustworthiness AI, which I think is the most, is the closest one, if I hear to SNS JU, is we do identify, extract the indicators for assessing AI systems. So AI impact assessment, which basically varies, basically ranges from the like assessing accuracy, biasness, robustness, security, safety, privacy, and so on. So they're basically against the established principles, which basically we call it AI impact assessment, but it actually can be data more. So if you call everything AI, so it's AI, but okay, depends on how definition of AI in that sense. What we are doing is also make a taxonomy, like a tailored taxonomy for the problem that basically we would like to assess, and that is basically an entry point for the extraction of the indicators, I would say, for this taxonomy base. Then it can also varies to ethical or ethics technology assessment. Basically, it's just looking at the ethics indicators, and then look at that part. I will jump into sustainability. I think it can be relevant here, but maybe less because it's more digitalized. But then we also do life cycle assessment, ESG, social life cycle assessment, and environmental impact. And then it goes to the foresight exercises. More for us is more resilience analysis. How I identify the indicators for assessing the resilience of the system, resilience as a whole value chain, and system optimization and modeling. We do a bit of the qualitative approaches, but the things that basically we try to explain this today is more quantitative models. So we are basically also running some of the projects in different fields, from AI in different sectors to like a bio-based food and extended reality. So the Motivate XR is the extended reality one. I think is the closest, one of the closest projects basically to SNS JU. But what is basically we try to explain today the most is the tool is the LLM based platform to monitor societal concern, or societal in a sense of the like a badge of a lot of type of indicators. Societal include social, ethical, environmental, infrastructure and stuff. We maybe need to better name societal parts, but everything's under societal. But we use the LLM to analyze the concern, let's say issues. It can be concern issues, impact, risk, bottlenecks, or differs. It depends on what kind of the indicators we want to achieve. So then we look at the like documents, the data set that it can be varies from the scientific articles, technical report, white papers, or also news outlets, and then we try to address and see how the addressing the values, risk, and impact look like. The application of the tool currently varies from AI impact assessment to ethics technology assessment, and also identification of societal concern, and also monitoring values. I go through very quickly go through 3 of them, but then more depth, Ria will explain about one of the examples that basically we have done in extended reality. What we are doing, for instance, for ETA, for ethics technology assessment, is we look at the documents. It can be internal documents of the organization, and also external documents about the organization against the ethical principles, and then see how we get the details and contextual understanding of where the organization stand in terms of the ethical approach, what pattern that basically they follow in a certain period, so like 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, and then what kind of the indicators that basically they are looking the most, and what are the indicators that they are basically missing the most. And then try to get the overview of the where they are standing in terms of the ethical consideration. Examples of which is here is less we are connecting to the articles, but we can also, but it's more connecting to organization documents. It can be internal or external. For instance, in this case, you can see examples. We look at the code of conduct in automotive industry and compare one of the brands to the whole brands, basically the whole industry, to see okay where they are standing in terms of the, for instance, in the security or safety of the cars. This is the one basically Ria goes dive into more about the societal concern identifier, where maybe I will leave it to Ria to explain more about the societal concern identifier. But in general, we connect the tool to textual sources. It can be articles, it can be news report, it can be policy documents, to map the concern, to map the societal, social, ethical, or maybe environmental, depends, and we can basically configure based on what the needs, and then get the concern and then cluster and categorize. And also these are the basically preparatory steps to reach to the indicator set, and then we see to how to prioritize and stuff, but then that is back to the values. Imagine we have different values basically matter the most and need to be materialized in a certain context, so that we can also look at the values and also the value tension, that basically if one values goes up, the other values goes down, how basically it looks in the system. And the last things that basically we do, which can help also in terms of the indicator setting, to better understand what is the tracking the policy related and regulation. And when we talk about policy currently, it's not correct, but then what we talk about policy, we consider policy as a regulation, policy, a standard certification, guidelines, roadmap, recommendation. All of them goes under the badge of this kind of documents. And then when we have them, we know the requirements of these documents, and these requirements help us to also shaping and then basically complementary to the making the indicators. And that is by that we reach to the point that Ria can continue. I think I will share because I basically have a control, but if you can control, Ria, you can go, but you can ask me to go further.
Do you see if I change screen now?
No.
No. Okay, then we know you're in control, Emma. I'll give you an example to make what Emma told a little more tangible. So I'll show how we use these tools within extended reality project in order to cover what are the social, ethical, and legal issues and set KPIs for those. It was for a European project, but it's the same procedure we will do for also commercial projects on new technologies. So if you change slide, Emma.
Now is the number of academic papers. Do you want to explain, or you should?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you see the screen? Or? Okay.
Yeah. Now I'm a bit more set up. There was a bit weird thing going on my end, but I think I have it now. For setting these kind of issues, identifying these kind of issues, you can do it multiple ways. What is typically done is that the project group sits down, think of, okay, is there something we need to think about? After a 10-minute meeting, nobody have more ideas, and that's the end of it. If you want to go a step further, often there will be a literature review. But again, you have limited people who can do a limited amount of research. So that is why we embed this LLM-based tool in order to cover really broadly the research that is already existing, the opinions that are already voiced. In this extended reality project, we only looked at research papers, but we do also have very good experience with looking into news articles, especially news articles from within the sector. For instance, in a project on industrial equipment, we looked into manufacturing newsletters and got a lot of good insights from those. So in this extended reality paper, we managed to cover the academic literature on extended reality, which was around 200,000 academic papers. We identified that of those 200,000 academic papers, 6,744 discussed both social, ethical, and legal issues, and extended reality, virtual reality, that kind of technological topics. So we took all those relevant papers in order to identify social, ethical, and legal issues. We did that by applying a topic model from which we got 112 different topics. And we could identify that 52 of those topics were social, ethical, legal issues, and that resulted in 18 clusters of social, ethical, legal issues. If you can shift them up. Kind of social, ethical, legal issues will then be what is generally present in the academic literature, so not tailored at all to the project at hand, which means that it's a way too long list and a lot of it is not relevant, but it also means that you cover a lot more complete than if you take the approach from starting from the project. So instead we start from what is the knowledge base out there and then go into the project, which is the other way around than what is typically done from the project and then trying to reach out. But a list like this is absolutely incomprehensible for anybody. So if you go to the next slide, Emma. So we do use our tools to also try to analyze this list. What is actually the key concerns, both in the full data set and in relation to each issue. For instance, in this extended reality field, we could see that safety, accountability, social balance, and solidarity were really something that came up a lot. Safety, security, often regards to cybersecurity, but also physical safety, like people walking into other people because they are wearing goggles and don't see them. There was also a lot of things about how do we ensure that everybody can get into this technology, because there is currently very high cost of entry to this. So do we create social barriers? And then the whole, if we create a metaverse where people are interacting a bit like they do on social medias, do we see a extreme environment in the same way as we see on some social medias, or can we curate it a bit to make it a more balanced environment? So that was some of the key topics that shows up in the general data set. Sorry. For each cluster, we can also go in and see a little more specific, what is this about? So we are clustering the issues in order to get to a more tangible number. Our brains like hierarchical structure, so we are trying to support that. So if we dive into just a random of the clusters, which is on social networks and community dynamics, we can see that we have 5 different issues under that. Something about how our interactions, how our communication in the real world will change. How will community building be within the virtual environments? Is there any psychological and behavioral things we need to wonder about inside the virtual environments, and so on and so forth. For this cluster, you can see the values that are shown over here to the right. They vary slightly from those from this total data set. It's more or less the same ranking-ish, but we can see that social balance and solidarity is extremely important when we talk about the transformation of the social network, which intuitively makes sense, but it also helps us understand what is the flavor of the concerns raised within this cluster. We also have a text here about each cluster, which has been generated based on the abstracts of all the articles that are feeding into this cluster. So we get a quite in-depth understanding of each cluster and of each issue, which will allow us to have a picture of what is the total framework of issues there might be within extended reality. Then if you go to the next slide, Emma. This total understanding is too much to react on. If you are to make tangible KPIs and if you are to design according to everything, you get a massive project, which is great in some cases, but in a lot of cases, you will not be able to handle that as an organization. We need to be realistic here. So the next step is a very important one, and that is prioritize within our context, within our purpose of our technology, what are the issues we actually want to work on? What are the things that we find important for our projects? Sorry again. And that can be established in multiple ways. In this specific project, we used expert opinion to identify, okay, for education context in the industrial sector, what are relevant issues? For instance, in this cluster I introduced before, we saw that this transformation of how people react in the real world is really important. How they interact in the virtual world, not so important. It's intended to be a thing you put on your own, take it off, but then you have your classmates around or your colleagues around. So you still need to interact with them in the real world, but not in the virtual world. So that gives some indication of what is important, what is not important for this project. We did expert opinion in this project. Another good way is to do it via workshops and interviews of stakeholders and of potential user groups. Sorry. If you go over to the next slide, Emma. So from this prioritization exercise, we ended up with 20 relevant impact areas. And that's a lot more feasible to keep in mind while designing the technology. It's a number where you can also start making KPIs for without the number of KPIs exploding and becoming intangible. If you go to the next slide, Emma. So to come to the KPIs, it is not yet done finished for this project, and I will not be able to share exactly for many projects, but the process of coming from these still somewhat general issues specifications and into a KPI, we use 3 different input areas, so input streams. There's some common KPIs, like based on our experience, we know, okay, for instance, if we talk about this legal and intellectual property challenges in XR, we know that intellectual and legal property challenges from AI, we have experience with that before as well. So we know that, for instance, the rate of imported data that should have, that does not have an IP form, that should preferably be 0. Like everything you put into the system, you need to know that you have the right to put it into the system, especially when you're talking in a B2B context. There's an aviation company involved in this, so it's really high IP concern. So there, everything needs to have checked, okay, are we allowed to use this information? So that's a common KPI we know based on our background. We have a log list we can sort out of that. Second input stream we have is that we run an analysis similar to what I just told you, but instead of running on general social, ethical, legal issues, we can run it targeted on what is the legal and intellectual property challenges in VR XR. And then we'll get a number of more specific indicators that we can then start prioritizing. That is a lengthy thing, so it's not many projects that goes in that direction, but it's still a good source of new inspiration to what could be indicators that have not been thought about within the project, especially for projects that are not so similar to existing projects. If it's very novel, for instance. If I was to do like a year ago on the big ChatGPT model or something, I would definitely want to have that analysis to give me some additional inputs. And then the last step is very important, to have a talk with those who are the project owners, those who are developing the technologies, the intended user groups, and have a workshop, have interviews with those, both in order to prioritize the common and the big data analysis KPIs, but also to say, okay, within this specific context, these numbers actually already exist, and they can tell us something about our issue. Or within this context, this makes sense to measure. It's not necessarily a common thing to measure, but it makes sense in our case. So that is how we typically go from the broader issue or the qualitative issue and go into some quantifiable KPIs that can be measured throughout the project to ensure that we, in the end, actually perform as we want on social, ethical, and legal issues. And I think that was the quick explanation, the quick example of what we are typically doing. And questions are very welcome if you have any comments, anything.
Actually, we're going to save the questions for the end. We have
okay.
a dedicated session. No, because I see them popping up, and I'm sure that they're there. So there's a fabulous explanation, and I think a very valuable method you guys shared with us. And yeah, so if it's okay, we'll save the questions for afterwards. And so now, actually, I'll pass the floor over to Julia, who's going to present another approach to doing this. That takes a different perspective, just to provide us a rich background to work with. So Julia, I hand you the screen.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Hi, everyone. My pleasure to be here. Hope I will start sharing the correct screen now. And I will go into presentation mode. Having listened to colleagues that just finished their presentation, our approach is not that different. It's just we start the other way around, and I will try to explain myself, and also I hope you will have the energy to engage into some interaction with me during this session to explore the common issues that we all start having when we need to identify the outcomes and indicators, especially the outcomes and indicators that are related to the so-called social domain, because there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of subjectivity there, and we are all struggling sometimes because it looks like perfect measures exist for everything else in the world, but here we are just lagging behind. My name is Yulia Romashchenko. I am the technical director with the organization called Social Value International, and I'm going to talk about the organization and the principles that we have developed and are promoting for measurement of social value. And by social value, we mean the value that we create through our, or destroy, through our activities, projects, organizations, supply chains on a daily basis. And then we will talk about the outcomes, and by outcomes we mean the things that change as a result of our activities, then the indicators, how do we understand that these things change, and I also have a tricky question for you to tackle today. If the indicators alone, if measurement alone is actually doing something useful for us, or do we need to go somewhere else to start managing the things that are changing? Because you were all talking in your presentations about the fact that we actually need to collect some data to understand what we can do to optimize what we are currently doing for the end users, for various stakeholders that are out there. So can we do this with indicators alone, with measures alone? All right, so on Social Value International, very quickly, and you can go to our website if you are interested in learning more. It is a movement with a mission to change the way society accounts for value based on broader definition of value. So we are not talking about financial value only, we are talking also about social and environmental value. But we know that a certain amount of work has already been done to transform and improve environmental value accounting. So in our work, we are specifically focused on social value. And if we are talking about environmental outcomes, we are also thinking about how they influence people's well-being on the ground. So as a movement, we are represented by a number of networks in different countries. Well, again, you can find the information on our website, but recently this movement has been growing and expanding as there is a growing interest in social value and related concepts like sustainability throughout the world. We strive to be a member-led organization, so everyone within the network is involved in the development of methodology and the making of decisions how this methodology is going to be applied in practice. And we work with both individuals and organizational members. And besides that networking thing and promoting our own principles, we try to help and to influence the other standards that are being developed in the field. And we are establishing guidance for our own principles of social value, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But we also work with partners like the Capitals Coalition, the International Foundation for Value and Impacts, and the UNDP SDG Impact Standards Initiative. So also trying to achieve that alignment throughout the sector that is interested in social value. And our work is based on the 4 Ps, the people, so actually the practitioners of social value who are applying the principles of social value in practice to influence power. And by power, we mean decision-making, and that decision-making can be about the activities that we implement, the resources that we allocate, and so on. So like I said, the main goal is not actually to measure social value, but to inform decision-making so that social value and environmental value would be taken into account alongside financial results when resources are allocated and important decisions are being made on strategic level, so that we could actually improve people's well-being and reduce environmental degradation as much as possible with the limited resources that we have available. So we need something to guide that decision-making process. We need to be able to collect some data to inform these decisions. We need to provide a framework for that. And there are 2 approaches that you can use to provide that framework. Something more standardized, like a set of things that you would like to measure, or you can instead standardize the process. And we go down that second road, and we have the principles of social value that are about to show on the next slide. And with the principles, we do not standardize the things that we measure, because this has come up in the presentations today, that sometimes unexpected things become important within our projects, like we need to add some outcomes to the framework that we initially developed. Or sometimes the things that we thought would matter are not actually part of the picture for the stakeholders who experience the impacts on the ground. So we believe that if we standardize the process and we base it on a number of principles, if you follow these principles, you will be able to come up with measures that will be meaningful for your project and that you will be able to use to inform your decision making. So to understand, how can I possibly change my activities to avoid any negative outcomes that I may be causing to people on the ground, and optimize the positive ones. So make them as big as possible and as big as needed by the stakeholders that we are working with. So I will very briefly talk through the principles, but there is further reading that you can do on our website. There are a lot of materials on the principles and their purpose of informing decision-making and optimizing well-being. So at the heart of it, we see the involved stakeholders principle. It is central to our work, and it is important to understand that by stakeholders, we first of all mean the people affected by our activities. So the end users, the beneficiaries, there are different names that can be used to name that category of people. And we believe it is important to give them voice, because very often when we are making decisions, we are talking to another group of stakeholders who can be the funders, the partners, the regulators even, and their interests are not necessarily the same. So we need to give voice to that group of people whose well-being changes as a result of our activities, but who oddly don't have a say in our decisions very often. Then in the next concentric circle here, divided into 4 sections, we have the principles that are related to the analysis of the outcomes and the value created by your project. So you need to understand what changes. You remember I told you about those unexpected outcomes that suddenly emerge when you start talking to people. So you need to pay attention to those and make them part of the picture when you're measuring something. Then value the things that matter, really, again, from stakeholder perspective. So something like getting people into jobs may be important to you as an organization running the project, but if you're running the project for people who have recently retired, they might not be that interested in returning into workforce. And this is an example I'm citing from an actual project that I evaluated, and it was related to computer literacy courses for the elderly people. So the funder of the project thought that having studied some computer literacy skills, the elderly people who have already retired will thankfully return to the workforce. But this was not happening. We were not achieving that KPI, and it took us a while to, understand that we actually need to engage with stakeholders and see the value that they see in the project. So we need to value the things that matter to people we are working with if we want to optimize that value and not just report on some KPIs that we have set for ourselves. Then comes the principle of materiality. So we need to make sure, again, that the changes, the outcomes that we are measuring are material, so they are relevant either to our work or to the needs and concerns of our stakeholders, and also significant. So we are achieving them on a scale, and if we are not achieving them, we need to understand why, if they are relevant to us or to the stakeholders. Finally, the fifth principle here, do not overclaim. We need to take into account the changes that can happen anyway without the intervention even, and we need to understand how the other players in the field may influence the outcomes that we are working to achieve. Then in gray, the next concentric circle, we have two reporting principles. We need to be transparent about the analysis that has been carried out and verify the result. You can verify the result with your stakeholders by taking back everything that you have done with the data that you received from them, and also the potential conclusions and recommendations that you're about to make sure you heard the people right. And also you can use some external verification where your report will be reviewed by somebody who is also a practitioner of social value, and they can assure that you followed the principles throughout the process and that the conclusions and recommendations really make sense based on the findings that you have been able to arrive at. And finally, the last but not least, the most recently added principle is principle number 8, overarching here, be responsive. So we do not collect data on our outcomes and impact for the sake of data collection. We collect data to inform decisions, to really change something about our activities, to be able to manage how we affect people's well-being on the ground, and we need to take various kinds of risks into account. So just another representation of the principles as colorful icons. Again, highlighting the purpose of it to inform meaningful decision-making, taking stakeholder opinions into account. Now let's actually dive into the topic of outcomes. So how do we view the outcomes in light of everything that I told you about the principles? So we often, when we think of impact, we often think about something that we have planned when we started our project or our organization or an intervention that we are running. And we tend to think that we achieve the intended outcomes with the activities that we planned for these outcomes. However, in reality, what we see is that our activities and decisions result into a whole range of outcomes. These can be intended or unintended, positive or negative. We can be affecting people directly, but there can be also indirect beneficiaries or people who are experiencing losses in their social value as a result of our activities. And these outcomes, these changes, they can be known or unknown to us. So we tend to treat the outcomes as the consequences of our activities rather than the goals that we set ourselves, and we are beautifully working to achieve them with time, because that's the reality. And so it is very important to be able to paint the whole picture of these consequences that happen as a result of our activities, understand to what extent they matter to people, to what extent they are connected with our activities, and how they can be managed. And for that purpose, we have one more definition, one more concept that we work with, which is the well-defined outcomes, because well, outcomes, they can result into chains of events. We carry out some activity, something changes for the stakeholders, then another change happens, another, and they are all connected. And we need to find something that is meaningful enough to people, that is the result that they are striving to achieve, and we can help them achieve this result, and so it can be managed by us. And very often we have found that these outcomes are connected with different aspects of people's well-being. It can be subjective well-being, how I feel about myself, how healthy I am, how confident I am, how to what extent I feel that what I'm doing in life is interesting and worthwhile doing. Also the social well-being, how well I am connected with the people around me, to what extent do I trust them, to what extent do I feel supported in my community. There can be also well-being at work, my work-life balance, my relationships with colleagues, and so on. But these different aspects of well-being, they seem very subjective. They are very difficult to measure, and that's where things start to get confusing sometimes. So let's see an example, and I'm going to ask you to either unmute yourself and share your thoughts, or just type your question, your responses in the chat as we go. So let's say when I was preparing for this workshop, I came up with a very plain example of a project that could benefit from improved connectivity. So for instance, with better connectivity, we are able to bring online classes to some underprivileged groups of young people, for example, who would otherwise have not had the opportunity to get the knowledge of subjects that would allow them to enter a university. And we want to give them some extra knowledge so that they could take these exams and enter the university. So there is an output in the project, a very basic one. We can count the number of classes delivered online to that group of young people. And then there is an outcome. They increase their knowledge of the subjects. And this is our report to the funder of the project ready. Please indicate in the chat, are you happy with this kind of report? Just by saying yes or no, or putting a plus or something like that, or give me a, well, I won't be able to see the reactions as I don't really see the gallery. So put something in the chat. Are you happy with this kind of report to funder? No. No. No, nobody seems to be happy. Have you seen this kind of reports? Then my next question to you. Yes, yes, exactly. That's the disconnect. Sometimes this is as much as we can say about our project if we don't do some extra stuff around stakeholder engagement and understanding the outcomes. So, but we go one step beyond. We ask the question, so what? So what changes as a result of increased knowledge of the subjects? And we understand that now our young people have improved chances of entering a university. Is this the end result? Probably not. So we ask one more question. So what? What happens as a result? So some of them enter a university. That's a good outcome. Are we happy with the report now? Any thoughts? No, maybe. Okay. So again, we don't know how good it is for them. And maybe we know that some of them have increased confidence now. They are more confident about their knowledge. They are more confident about their future. And that's a positive outcome that is meaningful for them. Have we painted the full picture now? if we are talking about the consequences of the activities? Again, just a yes or no in the chat would be enough. No. No. So if we think about those who enter university, alongside increased confidence, they may also be experiencing increased stress, because maybe as they come from a disadvantaged background, they were not ready for the level of intensity that they face in the university. So here we go. A negative consequence of our activities. We were not meaning to increase their stress, but this just happens as a result of our activities. This is somehow connected with our activities. Then there is potentially another group of people here. So some of them entered the university, but some of them, they improved their chances, but failed the exam. And now they have increased depression because, well, something obviously is wrong about them, because there are their peers who have entered the university, who now enjoy increased confidence, maybe increased stress as well, but they are not part of that lucky group of people. So this is just one outcome. There could be other outcomes so that stemming from the same activity and the same output that we see here. But now we have a much fuller picture, and we see that, well, there are actually some consequences that we might want to manage in a way. But my question to you is, are we accountable for the negative outcomes here in this picture? Looking for your thoughts in the chat. No. Depends. Any other thoughts? The ones who put, so Hassan, would you like to elaborate on why did you put a no in the chat? And tell me also, are we accountable for the positive? If we want to claim positive, we have to morally yes, legally no, otherwise halts innovation and ability to take decisions. It was not intended. Yes, it was not intended, but it happened as a result of our activities, and depending on the numbers in these groups, we can actually be causing more stress and depression than the positive outcomes, right? So it is a question, so out of 100 people, if 20 enter a university, do we still consider it and experience increased confidence? Do we still consider it a successful intervention? So I would say that the correct answer would be, it depends. Even though we are not intending it, we need to understand to what extent it is connected with our activities, what we can do differently to increase the outcomes here and maybe decrease something over here in the red. And so based on this information, we can start engaging more with the stakeholders to understand the reasons for all that, segmenting our stakeholders and starting to improve our activities. So this is the approach to outcomes that we tend to take based on the principles of social value. See the full picture, understand to what extent the positives and the negatives are connected with our activities and what we can do to manage them. Now let's go into the next section of the presentation. So how do we know we changed anything? We need indicators, and by indicators we mean something that will let us know that a change happens, and also potentially will enable us to measure the amount of change in an outcome for a stakeholder. So we don't only need to make sure that it happens, we also need to understand to what extent is it happening, is it meaningful for stakeholder, is it significant? And like everyone in this workshop has already mentioned, some theory on the indicators for you. They can be subjective and objective. We might need more than one indicator to make sure a change is actually happening, especially when we are talking about well-being. But the key thing is, again, to be able to measure from stakeholder perspective and hopefully enable them to identify the amount of change that is happening. So very often this will mean that we will need some subjective indicators. And just to give you a brief introduction into what indicators might look like, actually, I have a breakout room activity for you. So if colleagues could share the link
I just put a Miro link into the chat for everybody. So please go to the chat and do that. Do you want me to share my screen with the Miro, or Yulia, can you pull it up and share it yourself so you can walk through it?
So if you can share it, it would be great.
Yeah, I will do that for you. Yeah. If it lets me. Oh my goodness. Okay, no, my screen. No, it's okay. My screen just crashed for a second. Let me grab it. Share. Is that the right thing that I want to share? Yes. All right, guys, can you guys see my screen now?
Yes,
Okay.
it's all good.
Okay.
So you're going to go into 3 randomly assigned breakout rooms, and the task for you would be to look at the sticky notes at the bottom of these 3 fields. And room 1, choose the indicators that would allow you to measure confidence to apply for a job for your project stakeholders. Room 2, measuring financial independence, and room 3, physical health of your stakeholders. And we are going to do it as a speedy exercise, so you will only have 5 minutes in breakout rooms. And afterwards, I will ask you to share in the plenary the
Wait, don't start until you're assigned, guys. Wait, stop. You have to get assigned to a group first.
Let me know.
I love the initiative. Yulia, also, didn't you say one of the rules is you can steal each other's indicators if you see an indicator you think should be yours going into another group? So
yes, but you can also duplicate them, I think. So maybe instead of stealing,
so yeah,
you can reverse engineer some indicators.
Okay,
all right.
Yulia,
So
let me know when I can open the breaking room.
Yes, you can open the breakout rooms now if the task is clear, unless anyone has any questions.
And all the room does is tell you what your focus is. So, and we'll be there to help. Don't worry.
I see no questions, so I will open them.
Okay.
Let's see later.
How do we choose
See you in
the
5
room?
then. Independence for me may mean something very different than financial independence for you, for example, right? So that's an important point, and we are strongly in support of the idea that the indicators should be selected with the stakeholders, because otherwise we may set some measurable things for them that won't be meaningful, and the results just would not be reflective of the reality. So Katrina, are you back? You wanted to share something? Oh, looks like Katrina is having some technical issues, but just a few quick observations from the exercise. So it really depends on the context of what you would like to measure for all these 3 outcomes that you had on the whiteboard, and for any other outcome. It depends on what your project focuses on, because, for instance, with physical health, for some individuals, it will be very topical to take account of their body mass index or blood sugar or arterial pressure, if we are dealing with particular groups of people. For the others, maybe not that topical, and maybe you will not have this data. Also, sometimes there are pieces of information that are better accessible for us than others, like the medical records, for instance. It would be great to have them at hand if you want to take an in-depth measurement or tracking of participants' health, but it might just not be feasible as your interaction with them is limited to project activities. Then there are also things like validated questionnaires that can be used to measure a particular aspect of well-being or, the psychological state of a person, which are also a good thing. But in this case, we have a questionnaire on confidence, and it would not necessarily be reflective of people's confidence specifically to apply for a job. So we need to keep that in mind. And also, if you want to run a validated questionnaire every time we want to assess an outcome, this might be a heavy load on our stakeholders, and they will just start ticking random boxes just to get rid of us. There was also an indicator, I think, the number of arguments over financial issues with family members that represents something that often happens within the projects. When we start engaging with stakeholders and start hearing things from them, there are so many things that can be measured. And we need to understand also how representative they are of the whole group, how meaningful they are if we start collecting data on them on an ongoing basis, and what are potentially the decisions that can be informed by that kind of information. Any final thoughts here on the indicators before while I'm switching to my previous screen with the slides for a final activity? Anything, anyone? Okay, you're overwhelmed. And then the final part of the session, and one more exercise, a role-playing one. Are indicators alone good enough for us to start managing what we are doing and what we are achieving for our stakeholders? And I would argue that we need to set ourselves something that we call thresholds and targets. So we need to understand what is the minimum amount of change I need to achieve for it to be meaningful and positive. And we need to set targets, preferably together with our stakeholders, to understand what is the amount of change that people want in that domain of their well-being. And I will show you the importance of thresholds and targets in a very simple exercise. And I need one volunteer from the audience to role play with me and act as my line manager. Anyone,
I can do that. I like to be my line manager, so.
Okay, great. So you are my line manager, and I'm the person responsible for 3 social outcomes, A, B, and C. They are all relevant to our organization. They are all positive. And I show up to my annual appraisal with these quantified performance numbers. On a scale of 0 to 10, I achieved a performance of 8, an impact of 8 for outcome A, 5 for outcome B, and 2 for outcome C. So my question is, do I deserve my annual bonus with these impressive performance figures?
It's a really good question, because it depends very much on the importance of ABC for the company or for the team.
Let's say they are equally important.
I would...
A very unlikely situation, but...
Okay. Let's say I would approach it in building the average, which is 15, so 5. So the average, then I would look to my targets as a team manager. What do I have? Normally you have targets. People above a certain threshold are getting the incentive, below not. So that would be the numerical approach. Now we have it.
Yes, I will help you with that.
Oh.
What do you say now?
I see. So threshold and target. Threshold means lower threshold, right?
Yes, the minimum amount for it to be considered positive, and the target is the desired amount.
So the target would be including the incentive, or the target for without the incentive, because there could be different targets. So
Well,
a target for, let's say, average team member. If the target is for the average team member, then you don't get it. And if the target is for an incentivized team member, then I have to think again.
Okay, and if you look at outcome C here and my performance.
Yeah, definitely there's an improvement area. So
Yeah.
this is something to talk about. On the other side, you have also be above. So that is also a topic to talk about.
So maybe we didn't set the target correctly.
No,
Okay,
no,
and
I understand it. I have to understand it. Then because let's say that normally in my experience is the most important thing. So what am I allowed to give the team members? So this depends.
And what would we say if those were financial performance data? So I exceeded the target on B. I didn't reach it on A, but I'm above threshold, and I'm way below threshold on C. What would you say?
In total, you are below, unfortunately.
Yes, exactly. That's the kind of conversation we could have if we set thresholds and targets for our social impact performance. Do we have this data available in reality when we talk about social impact performance, usually?
Probably not. Not because we are talking now for the normal employee talk with a team manager, and there are some data available, but in social things normally not.
Yes, and usually the best we have are these numbers that add up to a nice 15, which doesn't tell us anything. So to be able to really make some meaningful decisions, we need to be accountable, not just to ourselves, but to our stakeholders, set these thresholds and targets together and work towards them. And I will stop here, but in the slide deck that we will be sharing after this meeting, you will also have some final thoughts from me around different kinds of reporting that there are and how well developed they are. So social value is an emergent field. It is the youngest field. So there is a lot of subjectivity, a lot of things that haven't yet been standardized. But as we evolve, as we continuously apply principles in practice, there are certain patterns that we can see, and we still can elicit some useful information for decision making. So the range of judgments, it might not be as neat as in financial reporting, but you can still make use of it. You can still start making decisions and improving your activities. And an inspirational quote for you: "It is better to be vaguely right than precisely wrong," from John Maynard Keynes, a renowned economist. And finally, some notes on stakeholder engagement. This is for you to study at your leisure time. And if you want to learn more, you can always go to our website, reach out to us, and join the social value movement. Thank you very much. I hope we are still marginally on time for something else.
Oh, it's okay. We broke the agenda a little bit ago, so it's absolutely fine.
And talking about agenda, we need to leave. I don't know if we have any questions from us, because we are a bit like an hour behind the schedule. We need to move to another meeting. Sorry for that.
Oh, no worries. There was one question for you guys in the chat. Zoom broke on me for a second, so I lost it, and I've lost the chat. Claudia, do you think you can go back and look forward? Do you have time for one question, Emmett?
Yes, there were two questions. So what do you see as the connection of your great work to the key values presented here before? And how do you see criticism of public text LLMs being biased by opinion trends?
Yeah, I put it here, maybe.
Yeah, I can start with the second one, with the trends. That's for sure something we are aware of. We are trying to mitigate it by having a very low reliance on the pre-trained understanding of the LLMs we are using. We are really trying to have it prompted in a way that it's mainly taking quotes from the text we are looking at. There is something about how do you define the different values, for instance, how do you define what is an issue? And there we are providing quite clear definitions of these concepts. So in that sense, we are getting less of a bias out in that, and less of a drift out in our results. And we are also checking the results manually on a regular basis to ensure that we don't get caught in any of these trends that might occur. And using also a number of different models.
Thanks.
So,
good.
Okay.
If you have any good ideas to what we can do more, we are very happy to hear.
Just one quick. We just finished in IEEE 7003. That is exactly on algorithmic bias. And you can get the standard. I'm part of the co-authors of the standard, so you can either mail me, or it's easy if you get IEEE Get program, you can get the standard for free.
Nice.
Sing.
And for the first question on the values that were presented, I do not remember exactly what
that was the project presentations at the beginning. It's the question they were asking. And so trying to understand, how would you take your method and use it to help inform or engage with values like those? So we had trustworthiness, we had one about safety, one about edutainment, and yeah.
So having more of a value perspective than an impact perspective. You can say we already do identify the values because they give a lot of background understanding of what are the actual concern related to the different impacts. So you can say we could shift and look at from the value, from the lens of the values, and look at, like, those words got caught in my mouth. You could look from the lens of the values to say, okay, within the value of trustworthiness, what impact do we see connected to that? We choose to group it more from the impact type, as that is somehow, in some situations, it can be more meaningful for those who are establishing the use case and those who are developing the things. But in other cases, I do see the value of going from the value perspective. So we are not 100% set up only doing it on the impacts, but that's what we mainly do from that lens. But we do use the values as well. I don't know if that answers.
Is room for a comment, or are we completely out of time?
No, we've got time. They just have run out of time.
Yeah.
So you can go for a comment, Stefan. Go for it.
Good. Then a quick comment, as long as you're in, and I will do it quick. I'm leading a group which is called Social Needs and Value Creation, and the biggest thing I get out from you here is that we have to have a much closer gap, a much closer look to the gap in between, let's say, engineers thinking in doing values, typically closely connected also to key performance indicators or to technical values, and the social values. And what I really like about what I have heard today is this very thorough social thinking in the SVI, which is complementary a lot to that what we are doing in the more technical groups. So here I would be really interested to close a little bit the gap.
That's good to hear. Let's continue this conversation beyond this workshop.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We do have one more thing we'd like to accomplish. So Alex, can I ask you what your question?
Yes, I was watching with interest every presentation, and that showed two somehow weaknesses overall, which maybe it should be resolved later. The relationship between KVI and KPIs is not deterministic or clearly. And at the end of the day, without this relationship explicitly done, the KVIs have less an impact. It's obvious. Therefore, that should be covered. Second, if you have KVIs very few, doesn't matter. Few means tens or hundreds. it's still okay to apply a methodology to sort them out. But if you have more, or if you want to know which one are more important, that should be clarified better. I'm just remind to everybody that there is a 60 years old technique called quality K functional specification used for designing very complex systems, which allows many factors to be, if you want, prioritized, number one, and number two, then applied to different aspects. And this could be a way to solve the first problem, which I mentioned, as well as the interrelation between KVIs, and also to move forward between this issue of many methodology to define or use KVIs. That's my comment.
Thank you. It's very insightful that there's still this interesting gap and this need to prioritize that we have to really sort out. So we'll have another round of Q&A in just a second, but we have one more special guest with us who's been waiting patiently. And we have some questions related to all of this for him, and he's going to do a dedicated Q&A to help us further think about this now that we've gone through these presentations and heard a bit of the insight. Tim, I want to introduce you and thank you for joining us. Would you be so kind as to give a short introduction to yourself really quickly?
Hi, everyone. Lovely to be with you and sit in the background being a bit voyeuristic for the last couple of hours, listening to what you're up to. My background's in economic development and in European funding. I have done probably way too many transnational partnerships over the years. And in my work developing how we measure success of European programs, found a real tension between things we put in program documents, targets we set, and those definitions of success that got signed off at a program level, and what I, in my heart, knew we were doing on the ground with money in projects, and how those two didn't match. And to cut a long story short, I have now for about 20 years or so been doing what Yuli has been talking about as a way of including some of those other more subjective things, not instead of, but alongside more traditional definitions of success, to find that missing piece so that overall we tell a story and find all our impact.
Thank you, Tim. That was a very, very lovely introduction, and already giving us a start about where you're coming from and why we need to do this work. Claudia, shall I pass the floor to you? And then you guys can have a chat back and forth a bit, and then we'll open the floor to everybody.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Tim. I saw that you were responding already to the issues that came out. So the first question is, do you want to summarize your comments up to now? I mean, what's your vision on what has been going on and on what we've heard and the issues that has been raised?
So, yeah, let me respond to that a bit, but I'm going to be both annoying and diplomatic by throwing it back to you with some questions. So let's open some of those up and see whether that takes us and whether you want to respond to some of my questions. I think the original thing you wanted me to do in this was at the end respond a little bit on some of those presentations, compare them. So I'm sitting here on my throne as arbiter and judge and god of all this, and you're asking me with just your 5-minute presentations to tell you what's right and wrong. Well, surprise, surprise, I'm not going to do that. Partly because I don't know why you are measuring your impact. And to answer that question, if you actually wanted me, if you came to me with a tender and a big scope and go, right, we want you to look at all of our projects and assess and give us a professional opinion on how we're measuring stuff, my first question would be, well, what's your purpose? And ultimately, are you getting anywhere near something that is fit for its purpose? So I'm not going to judge any of those presentations unless you give me the scopes and the context and the question you're trying to answer there. And this is very naturally, in my experience, how we tend to have a go at this. Our first question is, if you're new to social impact or subjective value like this, How do I measure it? And we rummage around a bit of Googling. If we've got more time, we do a literature review and we jump in and then we start measuring stuff. But there's a lot of stuff out there. Are we measuring the right stuff? So before you go anywhere near thinking about how, I would always encourage people to think about what. What should you be measuring? And Yuli has tempted us with all sorts of things about definitions of success, targets, thresholds, what are we aiming for, and how will we know when we get there? To answer that question about what you should be measuring, you've got to go one stage further back. Why? And unfortunately, we haven't all agreed that in society as a statutory or social norm that we all measure our impact or social value for the same reasons. We have done that for financial value and financial accounting. So we more or less all measure our value the same, disclose it in the public domain, whether that's your personal tax or your company returns or your charity returns. And like it or not, there's a whole load of rules that mean we all do it in a similar enough way that makes them comparable. So if I'm sitting here as an investor, and the older I get, the more I'm interested in what my pension's doing, and I'm actively making choices in investing. Do I want to invest in what Claudia's doing or what Katrina's doing if I want a mix of financial and social return? So financially, those things are statutory, measured in a similar enough way. And if your question was, how do I measure my financial return? You Google that, you'll find a standard enough answer, and you can start heading off down that journey of financial accounting and becoming qualified in that profession with all its regulation and standards. We're nowhere near that for accounting for value, social impacts, the SDGs, however you label that. So how needs to lead us back first to what, and then what unfortunately needs to lead us back to a little bit of navel gazing and going, why are we doing it in the first place? And there are different reasons and interpretations for that, because there is no agreed standard way of, as Julia said, a standard list of things we should all be measuring that's called social impact, or a standard method for it. Now, there are people out there working on standards, but until we agree one, you've got to define that yourself. Why are you doing it? What is your purpose? And if you gave me a good answer to that, I'd then be happy to have a go at judging your presentations and what you're measuring and seeing whether what you're doing is fit for that purpose. But that purpose could be a range of things. It could be wanting to improve what you're doing, in which case, as Yulia's shown with that little role play, how do I know whether that is good enough? What benchmarks have I got to be able to judge my performance against those with? Another purpose might be to promote what you're doing, to have a good public story to tell about it. And that might include reporting back to funders and influencing future funding by going, look, we've achieved our objectives and we've done some good stuff. Well, that's quite a different objective from wanting to improve. So, and again, think of that financial analogy. If you want to impress an investor with an investment prospectus and there are no rules or regulations between what you can put in that investor prospectus, well, there's some of this going on as a side conversation in the chat. You're going to focus on the positives and leave out the unintended negatives, right? If your purpose is improvement, that's more internal audience. That's management. What do we learn most from as humans? It's not when something goes well and an objective is achieved. We learn most from our mistakes. Internally, if you're in management groups and the finances come in every month or every quarter, what do you spend most of the time talking about? The one that's on target or the one that hasn't met the budget? So those are just two examples of different reasons why we might be measuring our social impact, but they lead to very different things that we would include and very different measures when you start talking about Is that an objective or a subjective thing? How do I measure it, and what is an indicator of that? If it's improvement, we're going to include negatives. We're going to jump on those. We're going to want real-time information to manage it. If it's external, promotion, influencing funding, I might just do that as an evaluation at the end, and I might just use the funder's objectives to show I have or haven't done what I said I was going to do, and everything in between. And you can see a mix of some of those things that you've got in there. So well done for getting a range of things in there. And I think in terms of improvement, which is the one that Yulia and I will always bang on about, I was encouraged to see you starting to rank and make some value judgments about some of the things you're measuring as well. So not just measuring it all for the sake of it, but here's the top 3. What does that tell us? Are those the top 3 we expected? If they're not, what do we do to encourage the ones that should be there? If they are good, how do we do more of them? And you're starting to interpret that data, have some insights that could lead to that management. So I would push back at you a little bit, that maybe how do we measure these things isn't the right place to start if you can't yet present to me what your definition of success is, which will come from why you're measuring this stuff in the first place. And then we can have a really good conversation about what would be fit for that purpose.
Thank you very much. It was very insightful. And I think it requires some time to agree on what purpose is, because probably different stakeholders or different project partners have a different view. So that's really interesting. I'll leave the floor. We have 3 minutes left. So if there's someone else who wants to ask a question to Tim or to comment in general, please feel free.
George raised his hand.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I have 2 questions. I don't know if the people that presented TrialsNet and Origami projects are here still.
TrialsNet, yes.
Yes.
Origami, let's see.
Because you, Claudia.
Yes.
Claudia. It's Claudia. It's Italian. Okay.
Yes.
So, regarding the game you presented, do you have is there any way that you devise this kind of game, or are there any resources that we can check online about how to structure such a game? For example, is there any link or something to
yes,
take an idea on how to make such kind of instruments, let's say, for assessing KVIs?
For the game, I'm not sure I understood your question. To create a game or to evaluate the effects?
Yes, you made the game and you also had a questionnaire, for example, I understand.
Yes.
This is the way. So you made a game and you had a questionnaire. If there is any sample of or the resources associated with this, I mean, at least the questionnaire, for example, because I have a similar problem to assess safety regarding a project we are working on, and I would like to check how to quantify safety, for example, and it's something similar.
Yes, well, we did a lot of work with Hassan on that, on TrialsNet. We also have a whole vertical on safety, so we certainly can keep in contact after this workshop and show you how we went on thinking about building the measure. But going back to the why that Tim was referring to, the way we structured the game and the evaluation started with the stakeholders, with some design thinking sessions. And honestly, for the game, we had in mind something totally different. But then the young people told us, well, but when we go to the park, we want to walk in the park. We don't want to play games. If we want to play games, we stay at home. So the whole process of devising the game and of deciding what is relevant to be assessed to see if the game is successful came out from involving stakeholders and potential users. But I will be happy to explain how we build the questions.
Maybe I will send you an email. I will find your email. Okay. You are with Ericsson or not?
No, Cross Media Europe, and use the Claudia.Chiavarino. I'll just
okay, I will find it across Media Europe.
Yes.
Yeah. Just Claudia, one more thing. We do have some deliverables, so online deliverable and some previous published papers. So there are some details there.
Sure, great. Thanks.
Okay,
and these are available on the website, isn't it?
I think this all does go back to that why question, and you think about the projects that presented, and so for example, why Claudia was doing her measurements and why Marco was doing his measurements were very, very different, and so they were doing very different functional things. So Marco was looking at something more, was a technology achieving a specific type of function, and Claudia, you're looking at was a specific type of experience provided, and I was looking at can responders still do their jobs? I mean, these are very different types of reasons for looking at these evaluations. And this is something that maybe as we further engage our KVIs, we really need to go back to this why are we doing it question? What's the point? Who is that for? That we need to really get back to. What is the purpose of this? So that we actually understand whether that indicator is right. And that goes back to, yeah.
From my side, it's quite clear because we are doing a framework for road safety. So we have already devised 3 different applications, Android-based smartphone applications. So we could share these applications to relevant, to drivers, in fact, because we address drivers and pedestrians and get feedback. Okay, so we have already devised a questionnaire. Maybe, Katrina, since we are live now, maybe I can send it to you and have feedback from you, if you can help, for example, because it's in the framework of FIDAL, as I told you on the
Exactly. We can definitely follow it up, but we should also take the lessons that we've been talking about here to think it through as well. So is this something you're doing because you want the drivers to buy the car? Do you want them to feel safer? Do you want to demonstrate that you're meeting safety requirements for the law? I mean, those all will then need different types of assessments. So that's where what
no,
Tim
it's
is
not
trying
it's
to
not
get
an easy
to.
task because you have to address also the specific target group that will get you back meaningful answers, so it's not an easy task. That's why I was insisting with emails to you and all this stuff.
No, absolutely. No, but this is really important, and these conversations are really important. As a group, we should be provoking and sharing and exchanging more so that we can understand, because when we ask each other these questions, we can pull out our own assumptions and then where we align and where we aren't, so that we can better understand what our priorities are and why we're making those decisions. So, because maybe we're all looking at, how do we build the confidence up to apply for a job? But are we asking the same question? Do we all have the same priorities within it? And we need to really understand, can I take those and use them here, or do I need something different?
No, I just need an example to have a base and let's say ascertain myself that I'm moving on the right direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is my concern. That's why I was asking Claudia, and also I would like to ask: is here the one who presented for origami project?
No, Marco's left, and not to cut you short, George, but we've actually run over by 5 minutes, so we need to politely let everybody else go as well. So, but look, we can any of this conversation. The whole point of this is to actually.
What was the name of the guy?
It was Marco. I'll share it with you. Don't worry.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your support.
No worries. I mean, the whole point of this is to start these kinds of conversations exactly to help us think this through so that we aren't just reaching for indicators because somebody can help us measure something, but so that we can get to the right type and understand the how and the why and what these indicators are doing and offering us so that we can really get an actual understanding of value. And as Tim said at the end, and as Yulia and Ahmed and Rie were pointing out, there isn't necessarily a standard process for this in the same way there are for other sorts of industries. And so for this particular branch, not only are the definitions malleable, but the what we're trying to do with them is still in the making. And so this is a chance for us to really engage. So part of this is also to try to help us get to the right kinds of questions that we need to be asking ourselves. Claudia, do you want to put in any final words?
No, well, two things. Just one big thank you for participating in all the different stages. And second, I mean, we skipped an activity which was starting from the purpose, which we had an activity that would have helped us to put the stages in the correct order. And maybe, I mean, I think the debate is going. So I really hope we can have further occasions of exchange. So thank you very much for all the contributions.
Yeah, thank you guys very, very much. And
can I make a proposal? Sorry, can I make a proposal? Since we are so many people here and we are all with question marks over our heads, maybe we could make a proposal for a workshop, for example, even at EUCNC or
there is a KVI really workshop going in for EUCNC, and there's also a working group, the SNVC.
You have already?
Group. Yeah, that is trying to do this. Yeah.
Okay. There's already. Okay.
Yeah, so but it's really great, but we should as a group continue to engage and do more things together, as well as take advantage of our external experts, which we don't talk to enough people outside of our group, and they're brilliant, full of insights. And so we should definitely continue this conversation. And George, it's a very good impetus for us to continue as well, because today I'm seeing a lot of names I haven't seen before. So you guys aren't showing up to the SNVC working groups. You guys aren't hanging out in the other KVI spaces. So we need you to join in and help ask us and prompt us these questions as well. So thank you. And thank you guys. Just thank you everybody for participating and staying extra long. And thank you thank you Yulia, Tim, and I know Emmett and Ria have left as well as Emilio. Thank you for sharing, and Marco, who has left as well, and Claudia, thank you so much for your time and your energy to put this picture together about what we're trying to do with subjective and objective KVIs as we try to figure out how do we get to the right ones and what is a good measurement. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. And if you have any further questions, just email back to the registration group, or you can email me or Claudia directly, and we will connect you. And if anybody wants to connect with any of our external speakers, we will happily connect you with them as well, because they are good people and we should have them on our projects doing this work with us.
The organization.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Great session.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.